She dipped her spoon into the tiramisu, held it up, and fed it to him. Not to me, not to the man she was married to. To him. The room didn't fall silent. Nobody gasped. Nobody noticed. Except me. It was my birthday. He didn't even look uncomfortable, just opened his mouth slightly, playfully, like they'd done this before. Maybe they had. I stared at the flickering candle in front of me. A single candle, crooked, stuck in melting whipped cream. It hadn't been lit. No one sang. A waitress passed by with a tray of espresso shots and paused just long enough to ask, "Would you like your check split?" Cassidy answered before I could open my mouth. "Just one bill. We've got it." There was no we in that moment. There hadn't been for a while, but this made it obvious, like being smacked with a velvet glove brick. I wasn't her partner. I was her backdrop. He laughed again. Some joke. She touched his shoulder. I couldn't even hear the words anymore. Just fragments. "Remember when? God, you're still awful." Her hand brushing her wine glass, the red swirling like a storm. I sat there, breathing still, like a house no one lived in anymore. The table had 8 people. Only one was me. I hadn't said more than 7 words the entire dinner. She didn't ask me how work was. Didn't comment on my new shirt. Didn't once look at me the way she looked at him, like he held the key to some world she hadn't let me into in years. I looked down at the slice of cake, fork untouched. My name, piped in shaky cursive across the plate. "Happy birthday, Elwood." It looked like a joke, a child's handwriting. I couldn't remember the last time she called me that with a smile. Someone beside me raised a toast, but it wasn't to me. It was for the project, some client account they'd landed together. Apparently a huge win. More clinking glasses. More laughter. None of it mine. I excused myself. No one asked why. I walked out into the parking lot. It was drizzling soft, stupid rain that didn't soak. Just annoyed. I leaned against a cold brick wall and stared at the back door of the restaurant like I was waiting for something to come through it. A sign. Or anything. Instead, my phone buzzed. One text from an unknown number. "You're not crazy." I saw it too. I read it twice, then again. My stomach knotted. I turned around, looked through the steamed window into the restaurant. Cassidy was laughing, tossing her head back like nothing mattered. And he, that man with the wine-soaked smirk, he leaned in and whispered something. She touched his wrist. She never touched mine anymore. I didn't go back inside. I didn't go home either because whoever sent the text, they knew something. And I was gonna find out what. I stood there for a long time, just staring at my screen. That one message, 11 words, twisted something in my gut. "You're not crazy." I saw it too. I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots popped up, then vanished, then nothing. Rain ticked against the hood of my coat. I watched droplets race down the restaurant window like they were running away from what was inside. I wanted to run too, but instead I waited. After 6 minutes, I counted, a second text arrived. "I can't stay here. Meet me tomorrow. 11 a.m. behind the coffee roasters on Whitman Street. Come alone." What kind of message is that? What kind of person sends that? And more than anything, what the hell had they seen? I didn't sleep much that night. Cassidy came home late. I pretended to be asleep, even though my eyes were glued open, staring at the ceiling like it might write out the truth in cracks and shadows. She didn't speak. I heard her change clothes, brush her teeth. She slipped into bed without so much as a whisper. I lay there listening to her breathe. I used to love that sound. Now it sounded like a stranger living inside the woman I married. At 10:45 the next morning, I parked 3 blocks from Whitman Street and walked. I didn't want to be seen arriving. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or just cautious. I passed a bakery, 2 closed storefronts, and a dog groomer that smelled like wet soap and fur. The alley behind the coffee roasters was quieter than I expected. Empty trash bins, a stack of cardboard, steam hissed from a vent overhead. It was the kind of place where secrets hid naturally and where people disappeared. At exactly 11:01, a woman stepped out from behind the industrial door. I recognized her, kind of. She'd been at the dinner, sat diagonally across from me, said barely a word. Shoulder-length brown hair, oversized beige sweater. I think Cassidy introduced her as Marcy from work or something. I hadn't paid attention. Now I wish I had. "Elwood?" she asked. I nodded. She looked around, then handed me something. It was a flash drive. I shouldn't have taken this, but I did. Because you deserve to know. Know what? I asked. My throat felt like it was full of sand. She didn't answer directly. Check the file, but don't watch it when she's around. And just like that, she walked away. No explanation, no drama. Just disappeared back into the city like she never existed. I went straight to a public library. I didn't want to watch it at home. Didn't want her to walk in halfway through and pretend it wasn't what it looked like. I opened the folder. There were 2 video files. No names, no dates, just timestamps. I clicked the first. The footage was grainy. A boardroom. Cassidy. Grayson. Late night. Just the 2 of them. They weren't working. They were touching. She was sitting on the edge of the table, his hand on her thigh. She was laughing, whispering, leaning into him in that exact way she used to lean into me when we were dating, when I was still her world. I didn't finish the video. I didn't need to. The second file started in a hotel hallway. Key card. Room 803. She let him in. He kissed her neck before the door even shut. I closed the laptop. My fingers were shaking. My face felt numb. You know that feeling when you think you're gonna cry, but your body's too stunned to follow through? That was me. The worst part? This wasn't recent. Both videos were from over 3 months ago, before my birthday, before the Denver account, before she ever mentioned his name. Which means this wasn't an affair. This was a relationship, and I was the inconvenience. I walked out of the library without a plan. I didn't know where to go, what to say, who to be. I felt like I was living in someone else's body, watching my own life collapse from the inside. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, and then I made a decision. No yelling, no confronting her at home, no threats, no dramatic breakup speech. She wouldn't even know what I was doing. Not yet, because the next move I made, it would change everything. I didn't storm out. There was no yelling, no smashed plates. No, how could you? Echoing through the walls. I didn't even take a suitcase. Just my wallet, a phone charger, my passport. Not because I planned to leave the country, but because I didn't know how far this would go. I slipped out before sunrise. Cassidy was still asleep, or at least pretending to be. We hadn't spoken a word since dinner 2 nights earlier. She probably assumed I was sulking in the guest room or licking my ego in some man cave. She didn't know I had already seen the videos. She didn't know someone from her own circle had betrayed her little secret, or maybe just tried to restore a tiny bit of decency to this mess. I ended up at a motel by the highway, the kind where the carpets always smell like burnt coffee and the vending machine proudly sells expired candy. Room 107, $72 a night. No ID required. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, staring at nothing. Then I opened my laptop again and watched both files all the way through, not to punish myself, but to understand every detail, every gesture, every moment she looked at him the way she stopped looking at me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was intimacy, cultivated, ongoing, rehearsed. In one video, they spoke casually about me, my habits, my hang-ups, my routines. Cassidy laughed when he mocked the way I fold my socks in perfect pairs. He thinks it's practical, she giggled. I think it's compulsive. They talked about how I always check the locks twice at night, how I like my eggs, how I get nervous before video calls, how I still wear the wristwatch she gave me on our 2nd anniversary. She called it adorable. He called it sad. And she agreed. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there blinking into a screen that felt colder than any truth I had ever held in my hands. And then I made the quietest decision of my life. I would disappear. Not forever, not dramatically, just enough to remove myself from the equation. I didn't want to fight for someone who had already rewritten the script without me. But I wasn't going to vanish completely. Before I left the motel that afternoon, I booked 3 appointments. A divorce attorney, a financial advisor, and a locksmith. I knew Cassidy. I knew she'd notice eventually, and when she did, she'd either play dumb or, worse, play victim. She'd cry, spin stories, blame stress, nostalgia, or even me. She'd weaponize her tears like she always did when backed into a corner. But I wasn't giving her that chance. I texted her late that night, "Don't look for me. You'll be hearing from my attorney." That's all. No punctuation, no flourish, no emotion. Just fact. She called twice. I didn't answer. Then came the text messages. What are you talking about? Is this about your birthday? I told you I didn't mean anything by it. Please don't be dramatic. Come home. Let's talk, Elwood. Please. There it was. That sudden flip, the desperation of someone who realized their game wasn't hidden anymore. The panic under all her polished silence. She didn't ask what I knew. She knew exactly what it was. I shut off my phone. 2 days later, I had the locks changed, the joint accounts frozen, and her name removed from every policy she'd forgotten I still controlled. She was locked out. Legally, literally, emotionally. But that's not where the story ends, because exactly 6 days after I vanished, Grayson sent me a message. And what he said, it cracked everything open again. I don't know what I expected when his name lit up on my phone. Maybe silence, maybe arrogance, maybe some smug, passive-aggressive line about how things happen or how Cassidy deserves to be happy. The usual garbage people say when they want to break something but avoid feeling like the villain. But what Grayson sent me was 5 words. She's not who you think. No punctuation, no explanation, just a statement. But it didn't feel like arrogance. Felt like fear. I didn't respond at first. I didn't want to open a conversation with the man who had been sleeping with my wife. I didn't want to give him the dignity of even existing in my contact history. But curiosity isn't polite. It doesn't wait for logic. So I replied, I know enough. Don't text me again. He replied immediately, you don't know the half of it. Trust me. I tried to walk away too. And just like that, everything I thought I understood, every linear, clean-cut conclusion I'd drawn, started to wobble. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then another message came in. She said you'd never leave, that you were too spineless, that she'd phase you out eventually. I clenched my jaw. I should have blocked him right then. Should have deleted it all. But part of me, the part that still couldn't believe someone I loved that deeply could speak about me like I was a couch he planned to donate, that part needed answers. So I called him. His voice was different from what I remembered, nervous, thinner. He didn't sound like the same confident guy who fed my wife dessert 2 feet from me like I wasn't even there. Why are you doing this? I asked. A pause. Then, because I think she's about to do it again. To who? To me. The next 10 minutes didn't unfold. They detonated. Grayson told me they hadn't spoken since I disappeared. Cassidy had texted him a few times, tried to keep things light. But once she realized he was backing away, she flipped. She said I was a project, not a partner, that I'd served my purpose. Then she told me she hoped I enjoyed the scraps, whatever that means. I listened, numb. The betrayal was rotting from every angle now. But the worst wasn't what she said. It was what he confessed next. She told me you were already seeing someone, that your marriage had been dead for a year and you were just too weak to end it. She made me believe you were cheating, too. Said you had someone in New York you saw on business trips. Said you once called her by another woman's name in bed. I sat down. None of that was true. All of it made him feel justified. All of it made her look like a victim. All of it was engineered. She didn't just cheat. She prepped for it. She built a version of me that made her betrayal reasonable, palatable, even righteous. She built 2 stories, one for Grayson and one for me. And she almost got away with both. He ended the call quietly. I'm not reaching out to her again. I just thought you should know the truth. Or at least part of it. Click. Silence. I sat in my car with the engine off, staring through the windshield like the world had folded in half. And that's when a new thought crept in, slow, quiet, but heavy. What else was she spinning? If she lied to me and lied to him, who else was caught in her web? What if she was doing this to someone else right now? And then I remembered something small, something I hadn't thought about since before my birthday. A photo she showed me a few weeks earlier. A guy she said was a client, just some weirdo who keeps asking for discounts. She laughed when she showed me. Isn't he ridiculous? But it wasn't a work thing. Something about it felt performative, off. Now I wondered, was that man next? Was he her new project? Because if he was, I wasn't the last victim. I was just the one who got away early. And suddenly, walking away didn't feel like enough. You ever see someone smile and wonder what their smile costs? That's what I started thinking about the night after Grayson's call. I couldn't sleep, not because I missed her, but because I couldn't stop replaying all the little moments that had once seemed so forgettable. Like when Cassidy would glance at her phone and smirk, Or when she'd hum some random song after a work trip. Or how she once said, "People are just puzzles. You figure them out and they're boring." I didn't realize she was describing herself. But I see it now. Cassidy didn't just have an affair. She created a system, a method. She broke people down into parts she could control, then stitched them back into stories that made her look like the misunderstood heroine. I was her loyal but emotionally distant husband. Grayson was her accidental connection. The next guy, I had no idea who he was yet, only that he was probably real and probably had no clue he was being cast in a role he didn't audition for. I needed to know more. I still had access to our shared cloud account. She never bothered to update the settings after I left. Maybe she thought I wouldn't care. Or maybe she assumed I was too soft to dig. She assumed wrong. At 3:12 a.m., I logged into the cloud. Most of the files were work-related, PDFs, invoices, travel itineraries, the kind of stuff that seemed deliberately dull. But one folder stood out. It was labeled Sardinia. We've never been to Sardinia. I opened it. Inside, screenshots of flight confirmations, hotel bookings, 2 spa appointments under someone else's name, and selfies, not of Cassidy, but of a man I'd never seen before. Tall, mid-40s, wore a lot of navy polos. There was one of him on a boat, another at a rooftop bar, and one in bed with a towel over his face, sleeping or passed out. One photo had a caption. "He thinks I'm in Tampa for the HR summit. LOL. My heart didn't break. Calcified. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sorrow. Just the slow realization that the woman I shared a house with, a bed with, a life with, had built an entirely separate world. A world where I was dead. Wait, but here's the part that changed everything. In the background of one of the hotel photos, a reflection in the mirror showed her phone screen unlocked. It was subtle, blurry, but I zoomed in until it hurt my eyes. The screen showed a text thread. The name at the top wasn't Grayson. It wasn't the guy in the photos. It was Marcy, the woman who gave me the flash drive. And the last visible message read, "Don't forget the backup plan if he figures it out." I froze. Backup plan? Was that about Grayson? Me? Someone else? The timestamps lined up. These messages were exchanged 2 days before my birthday. Suddenly, everything felt calculated. My ruined dinner, the attention on Grayson, the feeding him cake like I was dead moment. It wasn't spontaneous. It was staged, planned for me to see. Why? Why would she want me to walk away? Why would she need Marcy to remind her about a backup plan? I reached for my phone and called Marcy. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I didn't leave a message. I just sat on the floor of my hotel room staring at the door like it might burst open with answers. I thought I had been cheated on. Turns out I'd been manipulated into leaving by design. And if that was true, then maybe this wasn't just infidelity. Maybe it was something much, much worse. The first time I suspected Cassidy had planned my departure wasn't when I saw the videos or even when Grayson warned me. It was when Marcy disappeared. After seeing her name in that message, "Don't forget the backup plan if he figures it out." I tried to reach her 5 more times. Nothing. No reply, no voicemail. Her number stopped ringing entirely. Just a fast, busy tone like the line had been pulled from the wall. I even checked her work profile on Cassidy's company site. Gone. Her LinkedIn deleted like she'd never existed. It didn't feel like a coincidence. Not anymore. I kept playing the phrase in my head. Backup plan. What the hell did that mean? What was the primary plan? Why would Cassidy need one for someone she was supposedly in love with? Why would a backup plan involve me? And then I remembered something strange. A conversation I'd overheard months ago. Cassidy was on speakerphone with someone while I was doing dishes. I wasn't listening closely, but I remember one line because it struck me as odd at the time. She said, "Well, technically, if he leaves first, the narrative is cleaner." I thought she was talking about some office drama, some team member or a client account. But now, with everything spinning, I couldn't stop wondering, what if she meant me? What if this entire year had been engineered to make me walk away so she could say I abandoned her? That thought alone would have been enough to unravel me, but what happened next confirmed it. I got a call from an unknown number at 8:14 the next morning. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Is this Mr. Elwood Crane?" the voice asked. Male. Polite. Too polite. "Who's asking?" "This is Officer Langley with the Easton Ridge Police Department. I'm calling in regard to a matter your name has come up in." Would you be available for a few questions today? My stomach dropped. I wasn't guilty of anything, but when the police call you after a betrayal like the one I was living through, your mind doesn't go to parking tickets. What is this about? I asked. I'd rather speak in person if that's okay. I met him at the station. Small place, gray walls. It smelled like printer toner and old coffee. Officer Langley had a file open on the desk when I walked in. He didn't waste time. We're doing a preliminary follow-up on a report filed by a woman named Cassidy Crane. Says she's your wife. She was, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. She filed a complaint 3 days ago. Said you went missing. Claimed you left behind signs that indicated mental instability. She also mentioned paranoia. I almost laughed. Came out as a choked breath. She filed what? Langley looked at me with measured calm. It's not a formal charge. She said she was concerned for your safety, but the phrasing was interesting. She mentioned you had been acting erratically for weeks, and that she feared you might do something dangerous to yourself or others. That's when it hit me like a freight train. The backup plan. She needed me to look unstable. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted a trail of documentation proving I was the problem. That way, no matter what I discovered, no matter what surfaced later, she could always say, well, he wasn't well. Look at the record. It was insurance, a preemptive narrative. She was using me as her alibi. Maybe for Grayson. Maybe for her new guy. Maybe for whatever happened next. Langley watched me carefully, probably expecting some kind of emotional reaction. Anger, defensiveness, denial. But I didn't give him any of that. I sat there quietly and gave him exactly what Cassidy didn't expect. The truth. I handed over the flash drive. I showed him the emails I'd recovered. I explained the text messages. I didn't accuse her. I just presented a timeline. Langley's face didn't move much, but when I finished, he leaned back and said something I'll never forget. Sir, I'm not supposed to say this, but you need to be very careful. This isn't just someone trying to get out of a marriage. This looks coordinated. Coordinated? I asked. Like legally? He hesitated. Let's just say I've seen this kind of setup before, but not often and never this clean. He told me they'd make a note of it and that for now I wasn't being investigated, but the message was clear. I was a loose end, and Cassidy didn't like loose ends. As I walked out of the station, I wasn't angry. I was calm, more than I'd felt in weeks, because for the first time, I realized she never loved me. Not recently, maybe not ever. I was a tool, a background actor, someone to keep the seat warm until her next story needed a new villain. But what she didn't expect was that I'd survived the script. And now I had one of my own. I spent the next 3 days walking around with a stillness that felt unnatural, like I was wearing someone else's life. I wasn't angry. That was the weird part. I thought I'd be full of rage after everything. The videos, the lies, the complaints she filed. But instead, I felt like I'd been dropped into a frozen lake and was just floating under the surface, watching the world through glass. I didn't go back to the motel. I stayed at a coworker's guest house, someone I barely knew but who owed me a favor from years ago. He didn't ask questions, just gave me the key and said, "Take as long as you need." It was the first act of genuine kindness I'd experienced in weeks, and it nearly broke me. That night, I found myself staring at an old photo on my phone. Cassidy and me on a hiking trail in Sedona. Her hair pulled back, her lips pressed to my cheek, both of us smiling like the world was ours. That photo used to mean something. Now it looked like a prop in a crime scene, a staged moment carefully composed to sell the illusion of love. I almost deleted it. Instead, I sent it to myself from a burner email account and added a caption. What it looked like versus what it wasn't. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. Not revenge, not exposure for the sake of scandal. I wasn't going to torch her life. That would make me just another angry man with a grudge. No, I wanted her to see herself. I wanted her to feel what it's like to live behind a mirror and not recognize the reflection. So, I started putting together a file, a digital narrative. Dates, names, screenshots, timelines. I laid everything out not like an accusation, but like a story. A calm, measured, beautifully packaged summary of truth. I didn't add anger to the words. I didn't need to. The facts did the bleeding for me. Then I emailed it. Not to Cassidy, but to the executive board of her company, to her boss, to HR, and yes, to her new client, the one from Sardinia. I used a private email address. No signature, just a subject line. Before you trust her story, read this one. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 hours later, Cassidy called. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. What the hell did you do? Are you insane? You have no idea what you've just caused. Elwood, you need to call me now. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat by the window of that guest house, sipping reheated coffee and listening to wind chimes tangle against each other outside. I felt something I hadn't in weeks, weightless. By the next morning, the ripple effect had already started. I got a message from Grayson. Short, clipped. She's unraveling. You lit the fuse. I hadn't intended to destroy her, but Cassidy had built her world like a house of mirrors. Polished, reflective, convincing. All I did was crack one pane. The rest fractured on their own. The HR department launched a formal ethics review. The Sardinia client pulled out. Her boss, according to an insider email I'd been forwarded anonymously, requested a leave of absence be taken immediately, pending further internal decisions. And Cassidy, she showed up at the guest house. I saw her through the blinds before she knocked. Blazer, sunglasses, hair tied back too tight. The look of someone used to controlling outcomes who just realized she couldn't spin this one. I didn't answer the door. She stood there for 3 minutes, then left. No note, no call. And that silence, that unwillingness to face me directly, told me more than any apology could. She wasn't sorry. She was cornered. And people like Cassidy don't change when cornered. They vanish, then reappear somewhere else, reinvented, ready to try again on someone new. But I wouldn't be there to watch it. She'd never get that satisfaction because I wasn't her reflection anymore. I was her consequence. Took me weeks to stop checking my phone. Not because I wanted Cassidy to reach out, I didn't. But because some part of me still expected one final twist, another game, another attempt to rewrite the story. But it never came. She vanished from my life the same way she'd managed everything else. With clean hands and no fingerprints. Last I heard, she'd moved across the state. New firm, new story, probably already working on the next version of herself. But by then, I didn't care because something changed. I stopped waking up with that tight coil of dread in my chest. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head that I'd never have. I stopped trying to figure out why she did what she did and started asking myself why I stayed quiet for so long. I moved into a small house in Ridgefield. Nothing fancy, just clean walls and quiet mornings. The kind of place where you can hear your own thoughts and not be afraid of them. I bought a bike, joined a book club I don't even like. Started walking trails I never bothered with before because Cassidy wasn't the hiking type. One morning, I passed a young couple sitting on a bench, legs tangled, coffee cups balanced on their knees. She was laughing, really laughing, and he was just watching her with this look like she was sunlight bottled in a jar. And I didn't feel bitter. I felt ready. I've been invisible at my own birthday, ghosted in plain sight. But now I take up space quietly, gently, on my own terms. Grayson sent one last message a few weeks ago. Hope you're doing better. I'm not proud of it, but I get it now. I didn't reply. Not because I hate him. I don't. He was a piece on her board, same as me. But some chapters deserve to stay closed. And Cassidy, she can keep spinning her stories. Let her charm strangers. Let her pretend she's the wounded one. That's fine. Because the ending she wrote for me, the one where I disappear quietly and never recover, it didn't stick. I got up. I walked away. And then, for the first time in a long time, I didn't look back. Now I spend my days with no script. I cook for myself. I sleep in the middle of the bed. I drink bad wine and paint rooms I never finished. I sit in silence without feeling lonely. I make peace with the past, not by understanding it, but by no longer needing it to explain me. Cassidy once said, "People are puzzles." But she was wrong. Some people aren't puzzles, they're prisons, and walking away isn't giving up. It's unlocking the door. So that's what I did. I didn't get the ending I expected,